You know, every once in a while, you hear a story that's so completely wild, so out there, you just think, no way, that can't be real. Well, today, we're diving into one of those. It's a tale about a tiny town, a very angry, fluffy-tailed villain, and a 48-hour crime spree that absolutely nobody saw coming.
So, let's head over to the quiet town of Buckley in North Wales. For 2 incredibly intense days, this peaceful little community became the backdrop for a true suburban nightmare. And the cause of it all? One very, very angry gray squirrel.
And honestly, a bit of a psycho might just be the understatement of the year. This quote comes from one of the very first people to have a run-in with our little antagonist. She was literally just taking out her recycling when this squirrel just launched at her, leaving her with a pretty nasty bite. And as the town was about to find out, she was far from the last victim.
So who was this tiny agent of chaos? Well, believe it or not, he started out as just another friendly neighborhood squirrel. In fact, a local resident, a woman named Corrine Reynolds, had actually been feeding him. She thought they had a pretty good thing going, this nice little bond. She even gave him a name.
And this is where it gets kind of wild. With some incredible, maybe unintentional foresight, she named him Stripe. Yeah, after the main villain from the movie Gremlins. She had absolutely no idea how spot on that name was about to become. Because pretty soon, Stripe was going to turn on his #1 fan and literally bite the hand that fed him.
And things just spiraled out of control, incredibly fast. This wasn't a slow burn. It was a full-on explosion of squirrel-fueled mayhem that just erupted over a single weekend. The town of Buckley really had no clue what was about to hit them. I mean, just look at this timeline. In just 48 hours, Stripe went from a cute neighborhood curiosity to a legitimate public menace. The attacks were totally random, completely unprovoked, and they just kept coming. You can imagine the panic that started to spread through the community.
And get this, we're not talking about 1 or 2 isolated incidents. In total, 18 people were attacked and injured by this one squirrel. And these weren't little nips either. The bites were serious enough that many of the victims had to go get tetanus shots.
The stories coming from the residents sound like something out of a horror movie, but like a really weird, funny one. You had people getting chased down the street, gardeners were getting ambushed while they were just trying to water their plants. It got so bad that some folks actually admitted they were scared to leave their own homes. This one little squirrel was holding an entire neighborhood hostage.
So, with the town basically under siege, something had to give. The community needed a hero. And in a perfect twist of irony, that hero turned out to be the very person who might have accidentally started it all.
Yep, Corrine Reynolds, the same woman who named him and fed him, decided enough was enough. She took matters into her own hands, got a humane trap, and managed to lure the little Taro inside. Just like that, his 48-hour rampage was over. For the whole town of Buckley, it was what they called an instant victory. You can almost hear the collective sigh of relief. The menace was caught. The neighborhood was safe again. It really seemed like a perfectly bizarre, but ultimately happy ending to a really, really strange story. But this is the exact moment where the tale takes an unexpected and, frankly, a much darker turn.
Because once Stripe was captured, this huge question popped up. What do you actually do with a psychotic squirrel? And the answer? Well, it turned out to be way more complicated and honestly more heartbreaking than anyone could have possibly imagined. This is where the story stops being funny.
So what was the game plan? Corrine did the logical thing. She called the RSPCA, that's the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, to come and handle it. She just assumed they'd relocate Stripe, take him far, far away where he couldn't cause any more trouble. She was wrong. It turns out, because of a UK law that was passed in 2019, it is actually illegal to release a captured gray squirrel back into the wild. So the community's effort to trap the animal to keep everyone safe, it basically led to this impossible dead end. The only legal option left for the RSPCA was to put Stripe down.
Now, before you think this law is just pointlessly cruel, there is a very specific ecological reason for it. Gray squirrels, which originally came from North America, are an invasive species in the UK. They're a huge threat to the native red squirrels because they compete for food and they carry a virus that's deadly to the reds. So the law is really designed to protect that fragile red squirrel population.
This just puts animal welfare groups in a totally impossible position. I mean, the RSPCA themselves put out a statement saying they don't agree with this law at all. They'd much rather find another way, but their hands are tied. They are legally required to follow the rules even when it leads to an outcome that goes against everything they stand for.
When you zoom out Stripe's bizarre and tragic story, it really is a perfect little snapshot of a much bigger issue. It's about what happens when our world and the wild world crash into each other, which, let's be honest, is happening more and more as our cities and suburbs keep expanding.
And when you look at why these conflicts happen, you start to see a really clear pattern. As we build out our communities, we shrink animal habitats. And when we do things like feed wild animals, just like what happened with Stripe, they can get habituated. They lose their natural fear of us and start behaving in really unpredictable, sometimes aggressive ways. And of course, this isn't just some quirky British problem, not at all. We see this exact same thing playing out all over the world. Whether it's bears wandering through suburbs in the US or macaques causing trouble in Japanese cities, the fundamental conflict is exactly the same.
So what's the solution? Well, according to the experts, like the folks at the RSPCA, the real key is prevention. Instead of trapping an animal, which, as we've seen, can lead to these impossible choices, the focus should be on humane deterrence. Finding ways to keep wildlife at a safe distance without actually causing any harm.
The story of Stripe the squirrel started out as this wild, almost funny adventure, and it ended as a pretty heavy lesson. It really forces us to ask a tough question. As our human footprint gets bigger every single day, how do we coexist with the wild world we keep pushing into? Who draws that line? And honestly, there's no easy answer.